I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about what it meant to be a paratrooper during World War II in the U.S. Army. First, a little bit of a history. In 1940, the United States decided that since the Germans had had so much success with paratroopers in their invasion of the lowlands, that the military decided that it would be a good idea for the United States to get into the paratrooper business. And so in 1940, a unit was organized to start training to be able to jump from an airplane. The first training had to do with using towers that were borrowed from the World's Fair in New Jersey in 1939. These towers are 250 feet tall, and it's easy to raise a person up to the 250-foot height and just let him go and let him drift to the ground. That was the way you were initiated into being a paratrooper in 1940. Let me say this too, the first real mass jump was done in Sicily in 1943, and it was very successful, and then on we were in the paratrooper business. Well, personally, I was drafted in the Army in 1943, went through basic training, and all we did, everything we concentrated on was the fact that we were going to jump. We got our legs together, how to fall, our bodies in good shape, because we were headed for a parachute school which was established in Fort Benning, Georgia. We made it to Fort Benning, and there we went through 3 hard weeks of training, including learning how to pack our own parachute. That gave us a whole lot of confidence to know that somebody else wasn't doing a good job. The 4th week in parachute school, we jump every day, 5 times, and after doing that, we got our wings. Basic training of a paratrooper is very important because it's important that his body be in excellent condition. There are so many bumps and bruises and falls and runs, and so excellent conditioning is one of the first things we learn. We also learn how to be buddies, how to be friends, because these were people we're going to be living with, training with, fighting with, depending upon, and it turned out exactly just that way. A paratrooper is a volunteer. He is not drafted into the parachute infantry. He's drafted into the Army, and then if he decides that he wants to be a paratrooper, he volunteers, and then they offer him $50 a month extra for jumping. And I thought that was great, because when I went in, we were drawing $21 a month, and for the magnificent sum of $71, I got to be a paratrooper. We trained at Camp McCall, North Carolina. We went overseas in the summer of 1944. We landed in Italy, and from there on, our career was launched. We organized the 517th Parachute Combat Team, a regimental combat team, and included engineers and medics. Some of the jump training or practically all the jump training was done out of a C-47, commonly called a DC-3. This was I think during the war, the Army took possession of over 10,000 of those planes, and they become a workhorse for the military. The equipment that we carried in jumping is exhibited by this soldier here. As you can see, he is loaded. He's got an extra parachute on front. He's got a parachute on the back. He has a important piece of equipment is this carrier that carried a rifle, an M1 Garand rifle. It weighed 9 pounds. It fits in this bag, zippers up, and there's all kinds of harness hooks, and that hooks right onto your harness inside your chute. We also have to carry equipment for several days. In France, we jumped behind the lines, and it was necessary for us to have food and armament, bullets, rifle hand grenades. We carried a mortar gun. We had to have shells. So we were really loaded. Probably I weighed 350 pounds when I jumped at night in France in 1940. One of the instances that was really interesting, when you jump at night and you have to have a code name to identify each other. The code in southern France was Kit Carson. We jumped with a brigade of British soldiers. And I remember that during our trying to assemble together in the dark, we used a cricket like this to identify each other.
Okay, hold it up close to the mic.
We used a plain little cricket like this to identify each other, and we expected to challenge when you couldn't tell who it was, and you can't when it's pitch black dark. And we challenged, or one of my buddies challenged a British soldier, and all of a sudden we could hear complete silence. And all of a sudden he finally blurted out, "Some bloody American cowboy." That was his answer to Kit Carson. But this was a very important piece of equipment that we carried, particularly when you're trying to assemble a couple of thousand men in the dark in a strange land. When while we were in France, we stayed behind the lines at least 2 days before we could assemble, and we were scattered all over southern France. And that's the purpose of jumping behind the lines, because you get a very strategic and important headway on the enemy if he doesn't know where you are and what you're doing. So we set up many roadblocks in France, and we captured many German prisoners. Our next real battle came in December of 1944, and that was entitled the Battle of the Bulge. Winston Churchill termed it as one of the greatest, the greatest American battle of the war. But this was at Christmas time in 1944, and when Hitler decided to come at us again, and he broke through, and we were all put into the lines. We were just thrown up to the front, and we ended up at a town called Bastogne, where there were some people already had been surrounded, and we relieved them, and then there was a company of tankers. But living in that snow all those months made me want to not go skiing anymore in my life. It was hard. It was hard. So many guys were lost to frostbite, and finally it was great to get to a bath. And our bath consisted of a tent set up alongside a creek where they pumped cold water. And anyway, we got clean clothes and clean. And one of the most important things I guess we learn is endurance, stamina. We learn that no matter how tired you are, you can go a little further. Your body will respond to it. And I think I've used that myself in my business now. That some days you get so tired, but you keep on working. But it was nice. The comradeship was excellent. How a group of men, young men, our average age was 18, 19, and 20, could be molded into a unit where we protected each other. We cared for each other. We lost many. And in the Italian campaign, in the French campaign, and in the Battle of the Bulge. And it's hard to see things like that happen, but we knew we had a purpose. Everybody had the same purpose. Everyone was like-minded, and we knew what we had to do, and that was why we went. This is one thing interesting here was a young man that jumped with the 517th, our regiment. He was the only correspondent that jumped with a parachute unit, and he jumped with us in southern France. This is a cover of the back page of Life magazine in 1944, I think it was. I thought that was important, that he thought enough of us to try to really get in and find out what was going on. I'm holding an Air Force parachute. This is similar to the ones we used. It's about the same weight. It must weigh about 45 pounds. It fits on your back and is strapped. The one difference here is this is a free fall type chute. You jump out of the plane and then you open the chute by pulling a card. Where we were trained, the parachute is attached to a cable in the plane, and as you jump out the door, this cable pulls the chute out of your pack. That way we can get 18 men out of a door in about 15 seconds. The reason for that is that a plane going 150 miles an hour would scatter those 18 men over several miles if we couldn't get out all in one, what we call a stick. But what I had said a while ago, with this chute and the reserve chute that we wore on our front, along with the equipment we carried, the rifle, the food, the shells, the ammunition, the pack with a little shovel, all that made you weigh over 300 pounds. It's a lot of equipment, but you're certainly glad you have it when you need it. These are some pictures that were taken in Nice, France. This first one, the people in France celebrated Armistice Day too, which was the ending of World War I. And so our unit paraded on the boulevard in Nice in November of 1944. This is a picture of us entering a French town. We were really heroes when we came in town for the first time, and people were so happy. Just offer you anything you really want. And here's a picture of a dugout, a foxhole, if you want to call it that. There's a .30 caliber machine gun there. There's sandbags. This is one of the men of my unit. I was first sergeant in the rifle company, and that meant I was top sergeant. Let's see. Here's another picture of that same sandbagged foxhole we had.
This is really good here.
One of the things we did when we were in Rome is we had an audience with the Pope, and this is a picture of inside the Sistine Chapel. I thought it was so pretty. This is one of the mock towers that we jump out of. They're about 30 feet high, and you practice putting a harness on and just jump out of it in order for you to get the feel of the shock of a parachute opening. And of course, when you get to the end of the cable, you drop down and you practice learning to land on your feet and roll. This is another picture of the towers. They're 250 feet tall. There are 3 of them at Fort Benning, Georgia. And they are busy constantly training paratroopers.
Is that where the expression tuck and roll came from?
That's true. One thing you do, you learn whichever way your body's going is to grab it and roll with the punch. Sometimes it's like stepping off of your chair onto the ground, but then sometimes it's like stepping off the roof of your house. It depends on how the wind is blowing.
These photos are excellent. Any information you have on those?
This is one of the privates in my company receiving the Congressional Medal of Honor from President Truman, and he's one of the few of those Medal of Honor winners. If you can imagine a table 50 feet long, and we lay the chutes out, it's stretched out completely from the apex all the way to the folding pack, and then you straighten each each one of the panels, and they're laid in there perfectly. And then you start folding it up, tie it with rubber bands until you get the top. Tie it with a little string because that's got to hold on, and it's got to break whenever you're ready for it to break. And it's, the cable in the plane pulls the chute out of your back. Taken in Nice, France, and I have to admit that if I tried to grow a mustache, it would be pretty blonde. So this photographer said I needed one, and he painted that on me.
At the